Does anyone have any questions?
A human being typically lives about 80 years. How many times are they born and how many times do they die?
Well, let me see. You'd have to do some complicated math because, according to Dogen, there are oh God, now I forget the number. Geez, there's a thing called a kashanta, which is there's some 6,000 something of them in the time it takes to snap a finger, and there's a section in Shobo Genzo in which he calculates how many kshantas there are in a single day. So if you took that number, and it's in Shobo Genzo somewhere, it's in the millions, and then multiplied that by the number of hours and figure it, so that's the number. So a lot, yeah. I mean, the idea is, the Buddhist idea of birth and death is that it's happening continuously, moment by moment. So the universe is born and dies at this furiously fast pace, which supposedly only the Buddha was able to perceive. That's the the standard sort of, I don't know what, orthodox answer to that question. And since I'm not the Buddha, I never perceived it that way. But when I think about formulas like that I've heard from ancient Buddhist sources, I think about the way that there were certain things that, when I first encountered Buddhism, there were certain things that I heard from my teachers or read in Buddhist books that made perfect sense, and that I thought, okay, this is something I want to follow and practice, and this is good. And then there were other things that I was like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. To Tim, to Nishijima Roshi, to Dogen, and the ancient teachers too. But there was enough of a balance of things that made sense that I thought, well, this I can follow, this I can rely on. And as far as the in-person teachers who I met, I thought these are people I can trust. So I went along with it. And as the almost 40 years that I've been doing this practice have gone along, as things have progressed, more and more of the stuff that I didn't understand has turned out to be true. So I sort of take it on faith that the other stuff that I don't understand is probably also true. So that stuff that I just told you about, the bazillions of times that you're born and die every moment, I think there's probably something to that. I think there's probably some basis to that, and it's probably not just people talking out their asses, or just making stuff up because they don't know the answer, and they're just making stuff up to keep everybody quiet. So that's. There's a certain element of faith in Buddhism, which is one of the aspects that I think in Western Buddhism, I don't think a lot of people talk about it. Some people do talk about it. My first teacher, Tim, in America, liked to talk about it, which was nice because that was useful for me. He was raised a Catholic. He's from a nice Irish family, so nice Irish Catholics. I'm not sure. I think his parents actually came to the U.S. from Ireland, so I think he was second, or what do they call it, first generation? Yeah, I think he was born in the U.S., but I think his parents are Irish. So he was raised with this Catholic tradition, and then kind of rejected it and became a Zen Buddhist. But because of that, the ideas of faith and some of these ideas from the Catholic tradition were important to him, and he was trying to kind of understand them from a Buddhist perspective. And I was raised with no religion at all. My parents were kind of, I don't know if this is typical in Germany or not, but it's very typical in America to have people who are just kind of some kind of Protestant. They don't even go to church or anything, but they're not Jewish, so they must be some kind of Protestant. Or they're not Jewish or Catholic, so they must be some kind of Protestant. Because what else is there? That's kind of the attitude, I think. And that's what my parents were. So when I would hear about this idea of faith, it was very mysterious to me. I didn't know what that meant. And usually it meant, believing something that you couldn't confirm for yourself. And I thought, I don't know if I want to believe something I can't confirm for myself. But I think you have to have a certain amount of faith. I have to have a certain amount of faith in order to drink out of this bottle, right? I mean, some kind of faith that there's not poison or LSD, or something. I mean, somebody could have put LSD in this bottle. Somebody might have thought that would be really funny to dose the Zen teacher with LSD before the class. Maybe one of you. So I have to have faith that you didn't do that.
Do you feel something?
Not yet. But I think it takes about an hour, right? We'll see. Maybe after lunch we'll find out. Faith is kind of something you have to have just to get through, life at all. But when it comes to religious matters, it gets very sticky, because people can abuse your faith, and there's always scandals in religions. Buddhism has them, Catholicism has, every religion has some kind of scandals that are caused by somebody abusing faith. And I'm a big fan of watching all the Netflix documentaries about cults, where people really abuse somebody's faith. I just watched one about the Mormons. Did they show that one here about the? They did. Yeah, there's a really good one recently about a Mormon cult with the polygamists. And I watch all of those, and I watch the Rajneesh one and all these things. So people abuse faith, and so it's a very tricky thing. So you have to be very careful with it. And I don't know how, I don't know good advice for that. I guess I sort of got lucky that I had teachers that I could have faith in. And I have faith in the overall Buddhist tradition and in certain ancient teachers. I feel, this is kind of weird to say, but I feel like when I read even ancient sources, this sort of developed over time. It wasn't immediately apparent when I first started, but these days I can kind of get a feeling when I read something ancient, whether this person is somebody I can trust or not somebody I can trust. And it just seems to kind of come through in the writing somehow, even if it's translated. And I don't know exactly what it is, but it's just a sort of feeling I have for some things where you can go, okay, this person seems like he's legitimate, he or she, and this one doesn't feel like it's legitimate. This one feels like somebody's trying to. There's all different sorts of things. There's people who are either deliberately trying to trick you, or people who just don't know anything, but they're just talking. The two broad categories, which I usually try to stay away from when it comes to these things.
My teacher, Dogen, and I think she had it either from Gabrielle or from Kurosawaki. She was saying that Dogen was very modern for his time. You wouldn't imagine somebody writing in that time for his contemporaries. And there's this idea that he was actually writing for us.
Yeah. Oh, do you want me to speak to that? Yeah.
No, that's all.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I think that's true. This is actually something Nishijima Roshi used to say too. This is an interesting thing about Dogen, because one time I asked Taigen Dan Layton. Some of you might know the name. He's an American scholar of Dogen, and he's much more of a scholar of Dogen than I am. And I met him some years ago, and he's often kind enough to answer my questions about Dogen, scholarly questions when I don't know the answer. And one time, I'll tell you one question I asked him, which I thought was interesting. I said, "Do you know what Dogen's, real name was?" He must have been given a name by his parents when he was born. And Dan Layton did not know the answer, and so I think if Dan Layton doesn't know the answer, then no one knows the answer, because Dogen is a Dharma name. So that's I thought that was just interesting. But the other question I asked him is, how many people read Dogen's writings when Dogen was alive? And I said, do you think it was 50 people? And Dan Layton said, I think it was fewer than that. He didn't know for sure, but he thinks it was fewer than 50 people. So maybe 10 people or 20 people read Dogen's. And if you look at how much writing Dogen did, and how much energy and effort he put into his writing, it's a tremendous amount. I write books, for a living, and thousands of people read my books. I don't know how many books I've sold, but I think Hardcore Zen, it was translated into German and Finnish and several languages, and so 5 or 6 languages in total of my various books. So a lot of people have read it. It's pretty famous, and I spend time and I feel like it goes around. And I am considered a very minor author. Like I remember somebody was talking to me about doing some kind of event for spiritual authors, and like whether I would qualify. And finally, he said, "Oh no, you're not even on the radar." About me. So I'm not on the radar. Imagine how not on the radar Dogen was, Like 10 people read his things when he was alive. 10 or 15, maybe 20 people read it. But he spent so much energy on it. So it always strikes me as kind of a mystery. Why was he spending so much energy writing? And who did he think his audience was? I don't know, honestly. And sometimes I think, even though it sounds kind of crazy what Nishijima Roshi said, what Kodo Sawaki Roshi said, what Gabriele said and Doko said, maybe it's true. Maybe he was writing for an audience 800 years from now, And I even put this in one of my books. Like, if I was writing for an audience of 800 years from now, it would be like I'm writing a book for people who are like living on the moons of Saturn and space colonies, or I don't know what people are doing 800 years from now. Maybe they're in Star Trek spaceships. Maybe they're not even humans. Maybe they're who knows. 800 years. That's a long time. It does seem like he had some kind of message for the future, which possibly his contemporaries weren't able to understand. And one piece of evidence of that is that his writings were actually forbidden. The Soto Shu I forget exactly how the details went for this, but there was a point where they forbid anybody to read Dogen. And a lot of people suspect that the reason they didn't want Dogen to be published widely is because people would ask them to explain it. And they didn't know what it meant. Because what happened is the Soto Shu, the organization that Dogen established, the kind of school of temples and related things, that became very popular. But the writings of Dogen were not. A few things were read, kind of ceremonially in those places, but it wasn't like people were sitting and studying Dogen. They were just ceremonially using certain pieces that he wrote. So I think they didn't want people to ask them about Dogen because they didn't understand what it meant. And so maybe advances in psychology and philosophy made it possible for people to get to understand him better now than they could at the time. Well, I can get just Andy has a question.
The question is how many people in Japan could even read at the time of Dogen?
Well, that's true.
1%.
That's true. There's probably not too much literacy, but there were people who could read, and people.
In Europe, the same thing.
Yeah.
And the knowledge was taught by the priests.
Yeah.
And I think Dogen could have done his writings for himself.
Yeah.
So that it was a kind of disciplined thinking. If you are thinking about a problem, you always go in circles.
Mm-hmm.
And if you sit down and write down your thoughts, you have a disciplined thinking, because you won't write down 50 times the same shit.
It's possible. And he also read his writings to his monks, so we know that. So it went around that way too. Do we have time?
Yeah, what time period did the Soto Shu ban Dogen's writings?
I think it was this. Don't quote me on this, but I think it was the 1600s or around there. I think it was the 1600s.
Could you come back to the story of the bright pearl again, please? My question is, what is exactly the difference between the two stories you told? The one with the monk hurting his toe, and the one with the, I don't know, it was in England, with the Berkeley bishop. You said the second one just proved that the stone is a real thing and not just an idea, and the first story proves something more.
Well, I just think...
Could you elaborate that?
The difference to me was the conclusion. So in the Buddhist story, he has, as a Buddhist, he has learned this idea that, I think is what he says, body and mind are an illusion, so where does this pain come from? And so he's learned in Buddhism that body and mind are an illusion. And then he stubs his toe and he says, where does this pain come from? And then he has some kind of insight. And then he continues and he remains within Buddhism, and he remains a teacher of Buddhism. So it means he doesn't reject this idea that body and mind are an illusion. So Bishop Berkeley is an idealist who is also saying, well, he's saying that matter is an illusion and only mind is real, which is not what the Buddhists say. And so, what's his name? Samuel Johnson kicks a stone and says, well, I can prove that that's not true. And he kicks a stone and goes, ow, that proves that matter is real. So, to me, the stories are kind of almost proving the same thing, because the Buddhists are not saying mind is real and matter is an illusion. The Buddhists are actually saying mind and matter are both the same thing. and our understanding of them as mind on one side and matter on the other, that is the illusion. So yeah, that's kind of the short version.
I had to think of the sentence, the proof, the pudding lies in the eating.
Yeah.
So it's not just some abstract thing you can talk about, you just eat it and that's it.
Yeah, that's kind of it.
Okay.
Yeah. That's kind of it, yeah. I think that's, we need to finish. Okay. So let's chant. Turn this off.